All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to deconstruct one of the most universally admired masterpieces of World Heritage, the Taj Mahal. Now I know you're thinking, we all know that famous silhouette, right? The perfect symmetry, that gleaming white marble. But what we're going to uncover today goes way beyond that classic postcard image. We are going to map out the staggering human obsession, the heartbreaking emotional catalyst, and the absolute logistical brilliance it actually took to build this monument back in the 17th century. So, let's peel back the layers of history, the engineering, and even those persistent myths that have surrounded this incredible complex for centuries.
Let's kick things off by just putting the sheer scale of this ambition into a modern perspective. $52.8 billion. When the Taj Mahal complex was finally wrapped up around 1653, the estimated cost was 32 million rupees. If we take that and adjust it to modern valuations, it translates to a mind-blowing $52.8 billion. Just let that sink in for a second. This wasn't just a construction project. It was a massive investment of an entire empire's wealth into one singular monumental vision. But, to really understand why an emperor would authorize a $52 billion expenditure, we have to look at the very human reason behind it all.
So that brings us to Section 1, a monument born of grief.
As staggering as that financial cost is, it was ultimately fueled by an absolute devastating loss. In 1631, the fifth Mughal Emperor, Shah Jahan, lost his wife, Mumtaz Mahal, while she was giving birth to their 14th child. The devastation he felt was so absolute that literally just 1 year later, in 1632, he ordered the construction of this massive mausoleum to begin. You can really see the urgency here. By 1643, they were already holding the first ceremony to mark her 12th death anniversary, even while the work was still ongoing. Finally, by 1653, the entire complex, the outlying gardens, the buildings, the whole shebang was complete. It was just this rapid, furious exertion of power, and it was fueled entirely by grief.
And look, this wasn't just some romanticized legend. Historians at the imperial court actually documented the sheer depths of the emperor's despair. He completely withdrew. The records show he gave up music, he abandoned the lavish dress expected of an emperor, and he entirely bypassed royal affairs. This severe, intense period of mourning became the ultimate catalyst. He basically took all of that unyielding grief and channeled it directly into the stone and marble we see today.
Let's move on to Section 2, Designing Paradise on Earth.
So, the way this entire complex is laid out is essentially like a giant metaphor in stone. It's split symbolically. On one side, you have these buildings made out of red sandstone, and this was meant to represent the worldly markets, our chaotic earthly life, and that transition phase. But then the mausoleum itself is entirely clad in this brilliant white marble. And that contrast, completely intentional. The architect utilized these specific materials to visually and symbolically separate our messy, earthly existence from the divine afterlife, beautifully representing the enlightenment and pure faith of Mumtaz Mahal.
But here's the coolest part. It's not just a flat, static white. The monument was actually designed to feel alive. That white marble reflects varying hues depending on the lighting and the weather. So if you're there in the morning sun, it appears slightly pinkish. During the peak of the day, it's this brilliant, blinding milky white, and then it takes on this gorgeous golden hue under the moonlight. The architects purposefully designed it to react dynamically to light and moisture, creating this magical, ever-changing visual experience that really implies a divine presence.
And this whole place is practically a masterclass in the Mughal obsession with absolute perfection. For instance, that massive onion dome? It sits on a 12-meter-high drum just to give it that incredibly soaring height. And those 4 40-meter minarets standing guard around it? They aren't actually perfectly straight. They are deliberately tilted slightly outward. Why? So that if a massive earthquake ever struck, they would fall away from the tomb, keeping it perfectly safe. It's genius. Even the calligraphy on the arches gets physically larger the higher up the wall it goes, creating this perfect optical illusion so it looks completely uniform from down on the ground. And all of this is anchored by a charbagh garden, which divides the landscape into 4 quadrants, symbolizing the rivers of paradise, complete with a central pool, positioned exactly on a north-south axis just to capture the perfect reflection of the mausoleum.
All right, Section 3, the impossible construction effort.
So how do you actually build this thing? Well, translating these ethereal designs into reality required a jaw-dropping multinational workforce of 20,000 people, 20,000 artisans, laborers, and painters. And this wasn't just local labor either. Shah Jahan brought in specialized dome designers all the way from the Ottoman Empire. He got sculptors from Bukhara, calligraphers from Syria and Persia, and master stonecutters from Baluchistan. It was literally a global convergence of the greatest architectural minds and hands of the 17th century. And they weren't just sourcing talent from all over. They were importing the Earth's most precious materials. Yes, the translucent white marble came from Akrana in Rajasthan, and the red sandstone from Fatehpur Sikri, but they went all the way to China for jade and crystal. They went to Tibet for turquoise, Afghanistan for lapis lazuli, Sri Lanka for sapphires, and Arabia for carnelian. In total, 28 different types of precious and semi-precious stones were brought in from all corners of the globe just to be intricately inlaid into that marble. It gives you a tremendous sense of awe when you realize the vast global geography contained within these walls.
But to actually get those stones into place, we're talking brute force engineering on an epic scale, which is wild when you contrast it with that delicate stone inlay work we just talked about. First off, they had to excavate and level 3 whole acres of land, raising it 50 meters above the Yamuna riverbank just to prevent water seepage. Then, they had to build a staggering 15-kilometer earthen ramp just to transport the heavy materials to the site. Those massive marble blocks were hauled up by teams of oxen and an incredible fleet of 1,000 elephants. And finally, they used these elaborate animal-powered post and beam pulley systems to raise the stones into their precise positions. It really was an absolute triumph of 17th century engineering.
Section 4. Separating fact from fiction.
You know, whenever humanity pulls off something this impossible, the wild rumors are practically guaranteed to follow. And here is the biggest one of all. Did Shah Jahan really plan to build a black Taj Mahal for himself, directly across the river? It's a fantastic story, and it was actually popularized by a 17th century European traveler and gem merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. He claimed that Shah Jahan's son overthrew him before this elusive black tomb could ever be built.
So, is it true? Well, to put it simply, no. Excavations carried out in the 1990s at the Mita Bagh site across the river proved that the so-called black ruins people pointed to were actually just discolored white stones. Archaeologists went a step further and reconstructed part of the reflecting pool there in 2006, and what they found was that the dark reflection of the white mausoleum in the water was very likely the only black Taj Shah Jahan ever intended, which honestly perfectly befits his well-documented obsession with symmetry.
Let's quickly run through a few other major myths just to set the historical record straight. You've almost certainly heard the one that the workers' hands were amputated so they could never build a replica, right? The historical reality? Zero concrete evidence exists for this dismemberment story. Another popular claim is that the monument was originally a Hindu temple. Now, sticking strictly to the official record, both the Supreme Court of India and the Archaeological Survey of India have completely dismissed this due to an absolute lack of evidence. Finally, the idea that Italian or French architects secretly designed it, those are unsupported theories that actually stem from mistranslated European travel journals from the 1800s. The true historical record points firmly to Ustad Ahmad Lahori and a massive multinational Islamic and Indian board of artisans.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Preserving the Jewel of India.
Because now, we have to transition from the ethereal beauty of the past into the very harsh realities of our modern world. Today, the complex faces some incredibly severe environmental and structural challenges. That pristine white marble we marveled at earlier, it's literally turning yellow-brown due to environmental pollution. Acid rain from nearby industries like the Mathura oil refinery has actively been eating away at the facade. But maybe even more worryingly, the declining groundwater level of the Yamuna River basin is causing real cracks in the foundation. There are genuine structural concerns, leading to signs of tilting in those perfectly engineered minarets.
But it's not all doom and gloom. There's actually a massive ongoing fight to protect the site. The Indian government and the Archaeological Survey of India stepped in and established the Taj Trapezium Zone. This is a massive 10,400 square kilometer area all around the monument that enforces strict emission standards to cut down on factory pollution. To combat the overtourism and local smog, they've also mandated electric buses for all tourists near the complex. And in what I think is a super fascinating restoration effort, they're actually applying specialized mud packs directly to the marble facade. These mud packs essentially draw out the deeply embedded pollutants to slowly restore that brilliant milky white color of the stone. So after all of this, it leaves us with one incredibly profound question to chew on. Can a monument built by an emperor to last for all of eternity actually survive the relentless environmental threats of our modern world? The Taj Mahal is without a doubt a testament to the absolute heights of human devotion and engineering ingenuity. Yet it stands today as a rather stark reminder of the fragility of even our most spectacular achievements. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time as we decode another incredible piece of our world.